clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Renato couldn't quite put his paw on when he'd realized Lapino was working for the Empire. He'd never exactly seen Lapino sending coded messages to the palace, but he was sure. The rabbit had been on too many disastrous missions where he was the only survivor, or where he accidentally missed getting on the boat that went down to the abyss in flames. If Renato could prevent Lapino from getting back to the fleet with all the intelligence he'd probably gathered, it might be worth the trip. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lapino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lapino from at least 2 lynch mobs. You couldn't go sticking jewels in your gauntlet just anywhere. What if you dropped one and broke it? Luckily, there was a bench right here. The sword felt even colder. always felt that the rabbit resented him. Peppino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Ooh, was this payback? Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice?
Anyone ever tell you you have a lovely eye?
No? I'll just have a dash, thought Renato.
Cool. Wish I could do that.
Maybe I should follow my nose, thought Renato.
Before I kill you guys, I said, do any of you know where I can get a good smoothie around here?
Ravens were landing everywhere from dropships. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, the rabbit would give the Empire all the intelligence he'd been stealing from the rebellion, and they'd probably give him a medal. He'd have to be very careful about how he played Lupino. At the slightest hint of danger, the mad rabbit would take off like a rabbit.
Lupino would betray him. The core was dangerous. Renato had a fleeting idea that the two ideas went together somehow. And then it was gone again. Oh, damn ideas. They never stuck around when you needed them. A chest full of old banana peels. There had to be more. There was.
Bloody and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck. Now that he knew what the rabbit was, there were a few things about him that Renato didn't find so amusing anymore. You sent me an urgent message saying that you're in danger. Oh, I am. The Ravens are coming. Now, I got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky River was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Me? A traitor? I'm hurt, said Lupino. Why ever would you say that? We found your code book, said Renato. They hadn't, but he hoped Lupino would blow his cover. You got me, said Lupino. And you know what? I don't regret a thing. It's always about you, isn't it? You're the pretty hero. I thought you liked rabbit food. Go to hell, said Lupino. And he made a gesture. And 20 ravens came out of nowhere and stabbed Renato to death. He had tried something bold and paid the price for it. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lupino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lupino from at least 2 lynch mobs.
Where was a workbench when you needed one? Oh, never mind.
but he'd always felt that the rabbit resented him. Lupino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Ooh, was this payback? Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice?
Sorry, mustache, thought Renato. Made all these ore chests anyway? Well, you could have quite a business doing that. He hadn't noticed that path before. Thought? I'm the hero.
Ravens were landing everywhere from dropships. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, the rabbit would give the Empire all the intelligence he'd been stealing from the rebellion, and they'd probably give him a medal. He'd have to be very careful about how he played Lupino. At the slightest hint of danger, the mad rabbit would take off like a rabbit.
Fresh socks, thought Ronaldo. Please be fresh socks. Lapino would betray him. The core was dangerous. Bernardo had a fleeting idea that the two ideas went together somehow. And then it was gone again. Damn ideas. They never stuck around when you needed them.
Bloody and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck. Now that he knew what the rabbit was, there were a few things about him that Renato didn't find so amusing anymore. You sent me an urgent message saying that you're in danger. Oh, I am. The ravens are coming. Now, I've got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky River was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Renato felt like a real hero, brave and smart. He told the rabbit all about the Sky Ripper's God's Eye core. "I'll go get the core while you attack Zenobia," he told the rabbit. "But wait, I've an even better idea. I'll get the core and you attack Zenobia," said the rabbit. "Right, yeah, that is better," agreed Renato. Perfect. The traitor would make sure the Emperor got the core. Now Renato just needed the Emperor to use the core. If he could only get something that the Emperor wanted very badly. Zenobia. He could save her and bait the Emperor at the same time. Right. Now, all Renato had to do was fight his way through Zenobia's invading troops, sneak onto her ship and into her bedroom, and kidnap her without any of her dozens of guards alerting her. Then, he would rely on her love for him to convince her how evil her father was, so she'd run away with him instead of going back to her father, who was going to blow himself up. It did sound a little risky. But Renato had a feeling it would work out somehow. It always did.
He wished there were more pylons he could use the hook on. They really needed to construct additional pylons. People had laughed at the government workbench placement program, but you could see the benefits everywhere.
new pathway made Renato curious.
The market. It was going to be full of gogglers, wasn't it? Oh, it would have been so much more fun before the war. When the worst thing that could happen to you was getting fleeced buying a rug. Renato hated gogglers, but it freaked him out to cut them. Renato was halfway to Zenobia's encampment when Lupino showed up. He was disheveled and distraught.
They jumped us. I barely got away. Oh, they got the core.
Oh, it was all going according to plan, thought Renato. Now he just needed Zenobia on his side. Yes, that was even better. The Iblis Stone. Zenobia could get it. And then the Emperor would have to pursue them. Wait. No. The gem would corrupt anyone. Even her. That's it, he thought. Even Lapino. Even though Lapino was already a traitor. It would turn him against his secret master, the Emperor. He would try to make himself Emperor. And the Emperor would have to defend himself with the core. Boom. He was a super genius. This is terrible, Renato told the rabbit. If only I had gone for the Iblis Stone. But now it's lost in enemy territory. He handed Lapino a map. It gives the bearer so much power. We can only hope the Emperor never finds it. What was that? Said Lapino. I think someone's following us. I didn't hear anything. Rabbit ears. You go on ahead. I'll check it out. And with that, Lapino hopped off with the map. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. She was curled up on her bed. He'd forgotten how beautiful she was, how sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She was made of smoke, and he noticed he had a very solid blade to his throat. Did you really think you could capture me? Heard a familiar voice. I just wanted to chat, said Renato. Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He needs a sacrifice. Someone who truly loves him, to make a bargain with the lost gods. That's a vicious lie. He wants to bring them back. That's crazy. Why would anyone... They could make him immortal. An eater of souls. And with that, her eyes widened. She understood. Renato told her how he had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred. How he had slept in a burnt village. At midnight, the Emperor's victims had come to him in his dreams to tell him of the hideous eldritch rituals they'd been sacrificed in. He could still see those kittens and puppies. Their wide, sad eyes, their moist noses. You can't prove that. I've got a witness at the observatory. He couldn't tell her, not yet, why he was really here. He didn't want her to be anywhere near the fleet when her father blew himself and Lapino up. So he told her about how the Emperor's obscene rituals had raised ancient artifacts out of the land. How he'd followed the appalling trail of the hideous horrors His Majesty had perpetrated for the sake of his own immortality. Any of this ring a bell? He said. He told me it was all lies. You've always known when I was lying. I always hated that about you, said Renato.
The rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Renato had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them. Once you try it, you're hooked. A very clever engineer named Elon Muskrat had got his start making floating platforms. Not many people knew that.
Don't you think I'd know if my father started practicing black magic? Why? Would you join in? No. I'd destroy his books and I'd... Oh, God. Okay, you're not completely wrong. They've resurrected one of his victims. Well, look, I mean, look, it's not exactly alive, but it can talk. A true witness, she said. ever felt you were just going round in circles? Bernardo felt like that.
Energy spheres. Easy to dodge, but boy, did they sting if you didn't pay attention. Renata felt ready to take on new powers. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had taken special care to burn the reanimated witness to cinders. Zenobia stared at the carnage.
He didn't want me to hear the witness, did he? I guess not. What's your plan? She asked. So, Renato explained his brilliant gambit. Sending Lapino to get the Ibra Stone, become super powerful and corrupted, provoke the Emperor into using the core against him, thus blowing up both of them, and hopefully the fleet too. Let me visit your council, she said, shaken. I want to help.
Could he really trust her?
Done it. He'd made Zenobia see how evil her father really was. He wished she didn't feel this urge to join in the rebellion. After all, he'd taken care of the Emperor, right? Yeah, but she'd always been conscientious like that. She told him she had to go somewhere first. So Renato gave her the location of the secret base, and they agreed to meet in the ruins. He had a very good feeling about this. What had Zenobia gone off to do? What was more important than meeting the rebel council? Had he made a mistake, sending her to the ruins? No. He knew they could trust each other. He could trust her because she never broke her word. And she could trust him because she could see right through him. Well, she'd probably be there well before him. She at least didn't have to fight her way through rainstorms of ravens.
That would come in handy in a pinch.
Yours, said Reynardo, but he couldn't hear his enemy's answer.
Reynardo felt bad for littering, but these islands were short on trash cans. Slice the wings off a fly in the air. Not that he would. It's sort of mean, really.
As he came around the bend, there was Lupino, unconscious on the side of the path. and Renata could smell a familiar, sweet, smoky scent. Who? Zenobia. It had to be. She never used a combat spell when she could use drowsy gas. That meant she had the Iblis Stone. What would it do to her? She hated her father now. She'd kill him for sure. The council wouldn't mind if she killed the Emperor, but murdering her father would destroy her. He had to get to whatever ledge she was on and talk her down from it.
Oh, they really ought to put a railing on this thing, he thought. Surprisingly unwounded. Ha! Bet you never saw that coming. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
Everyone in the council chamber was dead. Zenobia stood shivering in the courtyard, drenched in blood. Why? He managed. They started arguing with me. I lost my temper and I wanted their blood. Not me. The stone did. Why did you take it from Lupino? I had a plan. You had a stupid plan, she said. I'm going to go kill my father now. No, you can't. You'll just take his place. You'll become worse than him. Get out of my way, or I'll kill you too. You won't kill me, he said. And I won't let you kill the Emperor. Enraged, she raised the sword. You hate him too? He could sense the Iblis stone, yearning for his death. But she didn't strike. If you kill him, he'll destroy you. I know you. Shut up! She shouted, her sword trembling. I won't lose you again. Not for anything. Get away from me, he said, and he was very close. I can't lose you again. And he was in reach of her sword now. I hate him! I hate you too! I love you, he said for the very first time. And then she was weeping. He was holding her. The sword had dropped from her hand. He glanced at the Iblis stone. It was no longer the black of the void. It looked like coal. No. It glowed, like a cinder. It was crackling, burning, crumbling into ashes. You've always loved me, haven't you? She said. She was weak. The stone had taken so much from her. Always, he said. She staggered as he helped her up. Let me take you away. Where? The island of Avalon. The sisters will heal you. He will follow us. Then we need the Farfarer, the fastest ship in the Empire.
The Empire had seized his ship. They'd have to take it back.
Renato had a feeling that was the back door to something. But what?
And there it was, his beautiful skycraft, the Farfarer. They would fare very far indeed, beyond the Empire, beyond the reach of the Empire, to the mystical island of Avalon. He didn't know exactly where it was, but he knew he could find it. And they would find peace there. Second star on the right, and straight on till morning, laughed Zenobia. And they laughed together for the first time in a long time.
There was an inscription on the platform. Balaleka lesson, with an address. this was a roundabout way of getting there. The platform used a hybrid propulsion system fueled by anti-gravity and wishful thinking. Renato was making himself dizzy. Fun. There were stickers all over the platform for really hot lady foxes, with pictures and addresses and everything.
But they did not go unnoticed. Scout ships lifted off, and the long lance of the Imperial flagship. Bernardo turned downwind to gain speed. The Raven ships could pursue, but they couldn't close. The far speaker croaked, "You return her and live!" "Go sacrifice yourself," yelled Bernardo. "Then you won't have her either." On the flagship, the Emperor was readying some arcane weapon. It couldn't be. It was the core. A devastating beam lanced out of the flagship. Bernardo zigzagged wildly to keep the Farfair out of it. Now the Raven scout ships were closing the distance, and the beam was getting closer too. Then came a blinding flash, and the air was searingly hot all around him. There was a thunderous, deafening roar. He could smell burnt oak and burnt feathers and burnt flesh. But when he could hear and see again, they were alive and unhurt. And they were alone in the sky. Zenobia embraced him. They had done it. Through luck and through love, they had won the war. "Avalon, here we come," he said as he held her arms wide in the prow of the boat and let her feel its speed. "Maybe the real Avalon is wherever we're together," she said. And so, after a bit of an argument, Bernardo and Zenobia went to one of the two Avalons. The one shrouded in mists, or the one in their hearts. But which one they went to, I'll never tell. He'd done it. He'd forged his own destiny. Well, he hadn't actually done it, but he knew what he would do. Bernardo smiled at the book. He practically wanted to kiss it. The kid's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. He'd saved the book and saved the world. Bernardo owed him and his mother so much. Bernardo lowered the mainsail and let the Farfarer shoot forward in the breeze. Second star to the right, and straight on till morning. This time, he would win. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble.
Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renata knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage.
The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters.
The Iblis stone. It would whisper promises in his ear, offer him power for blood. But this time, Renato was sure he could master it.
And so, Bernardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals?
Who leaves these chests everywhere? Wondered Renato. I should send him a thank you note.
What was he doing here? The last time, the stone had fought him for possession of his own soul. That was awesome! Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. to do all the killing for him. But that wouldn't be sporty, would it? Or fun?
With materials like this, he could probably make a really nice pair of barbecue tongs. Or even a sword.
A road less traveled. This could be fun. If it wasn't fatal, that is.
There was an inscription. Praise the sun.
There had to be some way to use the Iblis stone. It was old, wasn't it? People are so much cleverer now. And Renato was pretty sure he was cleverer than most people. Weapon he'd ever used. Or not. Yeah. Within your aerobics trains, am I right? not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. Renato hated cannon traps. Also, who reloaded these things anyway? He never figured that part out.
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once,
And he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him.
why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. The core, said the stone anxiously.
But even though Renato knew how evil the gem was, he had a clever plan for dealing with it.
Was he listening to a talking rock?
Ah, but the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he could defeat the Emperor with the very weapon the wicked old toad had sought for himself.
To be a hero, you had to sacrifice old friends sometimes, especially when they've become enemies.
As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Renato had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun.
Was it the time of the lost gods before the transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? It whispered. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls, its thirst for blood.
All right, I get it.
This was going to be interesting. rebels on Zenobia's island were no match for Reynardo. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power, the stone told him. This couldn't be good for global warming.
Couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? He didn't even need to see the gogglers this time. He could smell seared flesh. And like every other predator, they only eat their meat cooked. Preferably alive.
"Say goodnight, Gracie," said Reynardo, wondering who Gracie was.
Zenobia was waiting for Reynardo. She was alone, confident as always. Fire danced at the tips of her claws.
Are you here to surrender? She seemed as cocksure as he felt. But she didn't know he had the stone. And I've missed you too, love. He chuckled.
She spotted the stone and bolted without another word.
Somebody had been watching.
Precision. Ferocity. The device was a woman.
Finally, Renato caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes were wide, frightened. He didn't like seeing her this way. "Kill her," whispered the stone. "You cannot win your rebellion without it." "Please." "No," said Zenobia. "Not that way." Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? Renato hesitated. Zenobia was his greatest enemy. She was the Emperor's daughter and his greatest general, and the single person Renato least wanted to remove from this world, especially that way. She was holding her arms out before her, hands fluttering, fending him off with hopeless urgency. Nope, she was weaving a spell. He couldn't move. "This thing is evil," she said. She slid the Iblastone out of its slot in his gauntlet and slipped it into a bag. "Maybe we can learn from it." She eyed him with a strange, wry, apologetic look. "I missed you too." And before he could move again, she was gone. Learn from the Iblastone? What did that mean? Would she take it to the palace or to the observatory on the Nexus? If she thought it was evil, she wouldn't want it in the palace. And, after all, it was evil, wasn't it? Maybe I can outrace her to the observatory, thought Renato. Cats can run faster, but foxes can run longer. Renato felt a little sick. Ever since Zenobia had taken the stone from him, he felt an ache that wouldn't go away. He missed it. He wanted it back. He needed it back. Why hadn't he killed her when he had the chance? She was the enemy. He hadn't even seen her in 14 years. Why had he hesitated? "You're a sucker for an empowered woman." Renato kicked himself. "Don't make that mistake again."
Zenobia thought the stone was evil. Was it?
Well, yes, but he still longed to have it back.
He'd felt so good killing ravens with it, and yet he'd felt unclean ever since he'd touched it. She confused him. She'd made him want to be a better fox, and then she'd abandoned him, never telling him she was the Emperor's daughter, never contacting him since. Well, who was she to tell him the stone was evil?
Renato had always wanted a flying carpet. This was more like a flying tabletop, but it would do. Getting nowhere. Fast.
The scientist's toes were pointing arcane instruments at the stone and looking at it through prisms and reflections.
Mine, said Renato as he took back the stone.
Well, we need it for science, croaked the toads. So he killed them. He felt better immediately. Smarter, too. I thought you'd never come for me, whispered the stone.
Then, a far-speaker toad croaked, in something like Zenobia's voice.
Renato, leave the stone with the toads. It will swallow your soul. You'll kill everyone you love.
That did seem vaguely familiar. But Renato had an army to lead, an empire to bring down.
I know you can fight this thing.
Zenobia continued in the far speaker's croak.
You let me live. You know how evil it is. It will destroy you, Reynardo. It will destroy everything you love.
He had tried to convince himself that this time he would control the Iblis stone. But he could feel his will becoming brittle.
She was right. He would get rid of it. Right? Now. Or now. He didn't really want to. I know. I'll go to the mountains, Reynardo thought. I'll find the strength to do it in the peace and quiet there. As the Farfarer landed at the foot of the mountains, Reynardo was surprised to find Lapino there. What are you doing here?
Oh, you wouldn't believe it. I was stowed away on an Imperial courier ship, dressed up as a combat nurse carrying a general's beak transplant.
This is not a great time, said Reynardo, who was pretty sure he did not, in fact, believe Lapino's story.
That's when you need your friends,
said Lapino. I just need some peace and quiet, said Reynardo, and grimly set out on the path.
Deadliest bowman right by his side.
This thing really needed a roof. Reynardo told his friend how he had slaughtered the toads Now he had nearly slain Zenobia.
A terrible burden, this Iblis stone.
Sympathized the rabbit. Yeah, but I need it. For the rebellion.
Do you now? You know, you were a pretty fine fighter before you were wielding a demonic decoration.
Oddly, the sword wasn't whispering at him to kill Lupino.
Up ahead in the mountains, there was a peaceful spot. If he could rid himself of his burden anywhere, it was there.
Look, it's not personal, but you're still terrible.
Smell any better dead than I'd have thought.
Give me a lever, said Archimedes, and I shall open a gate.
Renato thought it would make a difference, snatching the Iblis stone before the Emperor could get it. And it would destroy him. Zenobia and Lupino, they were both trying to save him. Peace. That was what he needed. So much for peace and quiet. There was Lapino. Again.
You're stronger than some dumb rock, Lapino said. Let's just bury it, and no one will ever find it again. Renato could feel the spirit energy of all those dead ravens inside him, pecking away. The rabbit was right.
Even if the rabbit was a traitor, he was still right. He tore the Iblis stone from his gauntlet and threw it into the hole Lapino had dug. The stone was silent. Probably sulking.
Now whoop those Imperials, said Lapino. Are you coming? No, I can't come with you. It's my old injury, you know. Recently, it's been acting up terrible. I'd be no use to you at all. So Renato boarded the Farfarer alone. Renato felt lonely on board the Farfarer. How could his old friend Lapino, miraculously escaped from the Empire, leave him to face the final battle alone? Well, he'd abandoned Lapino before, hadn't he? It was only fair. And of course he felt lonely. He'd given up the Iblis stone and all the souls he feted. Of course he felt alone. But he had done the right thing. It had been hard to do, but there was no better feeling than that. Zenobia would be so proud of him. The battle, alas, was not going well. He no longer had the stone, and he'd never gotten the core. Lapino wasn't with him, and he was up against Zenobia, out there somewhere, maneuvering the Emperor's forces. The rebels had been outnumbered from the start, and he still had that aching longing for the stone. But that is what it means to be a hero. He would fight his way to Zenobia. He would show her what he was capable of. Just him, with no diabolic accoutrements. He would win, no matter the odds.
The portal that led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people.
Yes, that was it. Pirouette, slash, parry, dodge. Renato had never done such good work in a fight. He wished the poets were along to sing of his exploits for his old age. Maybe he wouldn't have to kill Zenobia. Maybe he could defeat her and take her prisoner. Then he could turn the tide against the Emperor. If she wasn't crowned princess, once this was all over, she'd have more time for him, right? By some miracle, Renato fought his way to the Emperor's ship. He was exhausted, bleeding, but he'd found the strength to reject the stone. Zenobia came out of the ship. "Renato!" she shouted, and then she fell down and died. Lapino was behind her, wielding a sword that seemed to suck all the light out of the sun. "You idiot! You threw the stone away!" cried Lapino. "You said it was evil." "It hates sanctimonious prigs like you," laughed Lapino. "We're having a grand old time." Renato turned and ran. But no matter where he ran, Lapino jumped in front of him until Renato was cornered. That boy could hop. "You wouldn't do this to an old friend, would you?" cried Renato. "You mean this?" said Lapino, as he slid the sword into Renato's guts. "Damn it! Again?" The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the sea. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage.
The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It would whisper promises in his ear, offer him power for blood. But this time, Renato was sure he could master it. And so,
Renardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? What was he doing here? Last time, the stone had fought him for possession of his own soul.
Interrupting story time.
Caught the lead, Raven.
Now we'll never find out how it ended.
The Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. Having a pet. Well, like having a goblin for a pet. This chest smelled kind of funky. He hoped he didn't get it in his clothes. There had to be some way to use the Iblis stone. It was old, wasn't it? People are so much cleverer now. And Renato was pretty sure he was cleverer than most people.
You got such delicious looking eyeballs. Go on to lead, Raven. Thank you, I think, said Renato. It never hurt to be polite.
Newly remembered knowledge. He needed to focus. The Ravens, at least, could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. There was a sign. Take the goat across first.
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. It was the stone, eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once,
And he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him.
why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. The core, said the stone anxiously.
But even though Renato knew how evil the gem was, he had a clever plan for dealing with it.
Was he listening to a talking rock?
Ah, but the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he... As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Renato had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun.
Was it the time of the lost gods before the transcendent Emperor?
Was it the future? These souls, it whispered. Take the power. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls, its thirst for blood.
All right, I get it.
This was going to be interesting. The traitors!
Called the ravens. He could travel at night, so long as there were ravens to set on fire.
The ravens on Zenobia's island were no match for Reynardo. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power, the stone told him.
He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? This one contained nothing but unmatched gloves. And something more useful. Zenobia was waiting for Reynardo. She was alone. He smelled burnt fur. His.
Finally, Reynardo caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes... Please. No, said Zenobia. Not that way. Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? With a flick of his wrist, he slashed Zenobia's throat. Her eyes widened even more. And then the light. The Nexus was beautiful. He'd never realized how beautiful. Everything glowed. The wind was so sweet. The sun so soft. The stones so warm. The black raven feathers. Black feathers. Suddenly, his eyes got filled with them. He was falling through smoke, under a dead sun. A voice calls him home. Is this a vision? Whose? Is this the time of the lost gods? Or the future? No matter. What mattered now was killing his way to the Imperial outpost and challenging the Emperor from there. Have you ever felt you were just going round in circles? Bernardo felt like that. Up ahead was Lupino. What was he doing here? He'd go to the outpost, use their fire speaker, tell the Emperor what he'd done, and then he'd go to the secret rebel base, let them know he was ready to lead them to victory. Renato rampaged through the Imperial outpost like a water buffalo rampaging. At the last moment, he remembered not to kill the fire speaker toad. After all, he wanted... But there was only silence. The Emperor was scared, like little girl. Well, he would gather the rebel army and slaughter the Imperial fleet. Applauded the Iblistone. Tremendous. Then the Emperor would have to answer his fire speaker, wouldn't he? Who are you? Asked a distant voice that sounded uncomfortably like Zenobia. What have you become? The mountains. Go to the mountains, urged another that sounded a bit like Lupino. Renato called the rebel council to let them know to gather their forces. Then he killed the fire speaker toad. Why? Oh, because to make sure his sword was sharp. Oh no, that's awful. So no one else could use it. Yes, that's it. Then he set off for the ruins and the secret rebel base. The ruins were crawling with ravens. Probably looking for the secret base, Renato thought. But then he realized they're probably looking for me. They must be very scared of me. Well, here I am. You are the honest warrior ever, whispered the Iblistone. And he had to agree with it, for once. Who was as good as Renato?
so happy. The stone was the best friend he'd ever had. Really, who would bury such a treasure in the desert? Soon, he'd go rally the rebellion and usher a new age for the islands of Erda.
Urged the stone. Let me make you Emperor. Come to think of it, Renato thought as he put down another raven, why shouldn't I be Emperor? How did anybody get to be Emperor anyway? By making war. I'm not counting the transcendent Emperor, obviously, who had banished the lost gods and started time. Yes, he should be Emperor. He would make a great Emperor. Right, Stone? Oh, right, boss.
Yeah! Well, the eyes have had it. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
Renato strode into the council. Let's do this thing. Let's make me Emperor. They looked confused and nervous. Had he mentioned the Let's go in this rebellion! He waved his sword around encouragingly. They ran. Cowards. He'd stop them. He cut down a few to inspire the others. But soon, there was no one to cut down. Well then, he'd have to attack the fleet alone. More for me, he said. Unless it was the stone that said it. Traitors. Traitors, all of them. They'd run rather than following him, rather than cheering him. What should he do to the cowards? Anything he wanted to. After all, he was a true hero, the best warrior there ever was. No one could stop him now. But first, finish him. The Emperor, that is. Where was the rebel fleet? They weren't even trying an assault. They were going to miss a day in history. The downfall of this dynasty, and a new one to take its place. He didn't have to kill all the ravens. He could enslave them, and enslave the toads too. All the animals would worship him as a god, for he had once been a god. They would willingly give him their blood and their soul. And the world would change, would become familiar again. That's how we do it, said Renato to himself. Renato was glowing with dark power. Already the sun had dimmed. He could do anything, he realized. He could wrap the island safely in smoke again. He was beyond a hero. He was going to become a god again. How odd, he thought, that the Iblis Stone had nothing to say about any of this. Well, no matter. Once he killed this petty Toad Emperor, he would bring back the Black Sun.
Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of him. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time.
He found the Emperor and the Council huddling by his ship, plotting. They saw him and cowered before him.
Back to hell, fiend.
Croaked the Emperor desperately.
In the name of the Transcendent Emperor!
Croaked the speaker. They held some arcane items he didn't recognize. He simply flexed his will and sucked their souls out of their bodies. And Iblis exulted. It is finished. And the void that had been a mere stone on a sword expanded. It stretched and ripped like a vast womb. And a gaze, black and pitiless as the sun, passed through the void into the land. And so time ended. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. And he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage.
The island was windswept.
Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in the buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. And he hadn't come too late.
Renato felt like he was bursting with knowledge. But what kind?
You couldn't hack this kind of firewall. You had to warm it up to you. There had to be some way to use the Iblis stone. It was old, wasn't it? People were so much cleverer now. And Renato was pretty sure he was cleverer than Titan. The Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. This wasn't actually such a hard puzzle, come to think of it.
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. It was the stone, eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once,
And he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him.
why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god, torn out by the transcendent emperor to power his greatest weapon. The core, said the stone anxiously.
But even though Renato knew how evil the gem was, he had a clever plan for dealing with it.
The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance. The stone felt a bit clingy, and he had a feeling it did not have his best interests at heart. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Sky Ripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods. Even without its armature, the core would still possess great power. He would go there. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Renato had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Swordproof School together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him every secret about herself, except the biggest one, that she was the Emperor's daughter. No, kill Sylvia, whispered the stone. Before it's too late. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time.
You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead.
The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. You're weak, whispered the stone. The core will kill you. Are you afraid of it? Don't be ridiculous. It chuckled. But it's unstable. It will poison you so much as to carry it, and then if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically. Renato did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards.
Of course there was a puzzle. You couldn't expect the Transcendent Emperor to bury a god's eye in a leather sack where anyone could pick it up.
As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical.
No! It's too much power. We'll rip a hole in space and time.
He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out.
When Ronaldo came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent.
"I can't hear you," he sang out, and "You?" It didn't answer. "Ha!" he said.
He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? As the Farfarer made its way toward the Nexus, Ronaldo watched sparks fly out of the core. The Iblis stone sucked them in hungrily. You'd think the stone would want this kind of power, wouldn't it? Thought Ronaldo. Well, the scientists would explain it all. This time, Ronaldo was sure he'd figured out how to use the core safely. See? He'd trusted his gut, and it had worked out. That's what it meant to be a hero. To ignore the naysayers and the oddmakers, and do what you knew was right, and have it turn out to be the right thing. Well, he wasn't worried. Once he got to the observatory, the scientist toads could explain it. Then he could carry the war into the enemy's camp and destroy them all. Oh dear, he was getting a little bloodthirsty, wasn't he?
Bernardo had never felt better in his life. Normally, a battle would wear him down and he would need a night's sleep. Now he felt like he could go all night and all day. He felt like people were cheering him on, and he could practically hear their applause as he slew one raven after another. The Iblis Stone and the Sky Ripper Core. Two artifacts from the time of legends. Bernardo was becoming a legendary hero, wasn't he? He had enough power to save the rebellion, but he had to understand this power, so he would not misuse it. See? He'd trusted his gut, and it had worked out. That's what it meant to be a hero. To ignore the naysayers and the oddmakers, and do what you knew was right, and have it turn out to be the right thing. Well, he wasn't worried. Once he got to the observatory, the scientist toads could explain it. Then he could carry the war into the enemy's camp and destroy them all. Oh dear, he was getting a little bloodthirsty, wasn't he? Bernardo had never felt better in his life. Normally, a battle would wear him down, and he would need a night's sleep. Now he felt like he could go all night and all day. He felt like people were cheering him on, and he could practically hear their applause as he slew one raven after another. The Imperial fleet was closing in on the rebels, forcing them to come out and fight. Bernardo was itching to bring the fight to the enemy. He had to remind himself not to be too reckless. A cannon trap. Who doesn't love being shot at by cannons? And who kept these things loaded anyway?
The toads at the observatory measured the stone with their occult devices. I fed it the core of Sky River, explained Renato. No more TV balance souls.
But the core is not an unlimited energy source,
said one toad. Another said,
there's a feedback loop, you see, which could overload the stone. The stone doesn't actually feed on souls,
claimed a third.
But on pain of killing another sentient being. If you can truly be at peace with yourself, it would not overload.
This was all very confusing. At peace? Yes, the mountains were peaceful and quiet, but he now had the power to turn the tides. He should report to the Rebellion Council and prepare for the decisive battle.
The one thing he understood from all the toad arguments, maybe the stone did not feed on blood or souls or rage. It fed on empathy. It fed on the pain he felt when he put an end to another being's existence. Even if that other being was a raven intent on killing him, if he could find peace, then he could use the power of the Ibla stone without being taken over by its evil. Yes, that was the way to defeat the Ibla stone. The mountains. He would go to the mountains. He could find peace there. Unfortunately, the mountains were not empty. There were ravens everywhere. No matter. He had to fight, yes, but he didn't have to be angry. Parry, dodge, slash, and breathe. Yes, focus on the rhythm, the dance of it, not on the blood or the raven's core as they died. Ah, it was working. He wasn't feeling those dark jolts of eldritch energy. He wasn't feeding the Iblis stone. Look, it's not personal, but your mother wears army boots. On her ears. The stone was still silent. His mind was his own, and his heart, too. He bore them no ill will, these ravens. They were doing their job. They were expressing their nature. Dance, whirl, parry, jab, and breathe. It was all so simple, wasn't it? But something was missing. He didn't feel truly at peace. Wait. Wasn't this near where Calaveras lived? The sage would help him figure it all out.
was a roundabout way of getting there. Renato was making himself dizzy. Fun. Stone, silenced by the Sky River's core, had given Renato enough power to challenge the Imperial fleet. But what Renato was seeking was inner peace. The rebellion was on the verge of extinction. It would have to wait. At the end of the mountain path, he found the wise Calaveras in his workshop.
"Do fixed souls or only artifacts?" he asked the sage.
Does your soul need fixing?
Asked the sage. "I've been killing a lot of ravens lately," he told the sage.
You're a fox,
said Calaveras.
And to kill birds is part of your nature. Take joy in it. I mean, I might as well worry about eating flies. Don't you like a fly?
It was true. That's what he had forgotten. The joy. Now he was ready for the final battle. The Farfarer cut through the clouds. The air had never felt so sweet since he was a child.
There it was. The dreaded Imperial fleet. He could smell wet hemp ropes ahead, wood and tar, and ravens. Even the fleet smelt good, somehow. He was ready.
He was ready.
Renato had it all squared away in his head.
He would kill the Emperor. Isengrim III had begun well, but he had gone mad. He was trying to invoke the lost gods by means of dark, blasphemous rituals. That was a secret. But the victims had spoken to Renato. The ghosts had spoken. No anger. Renato could not afford anger. It was empowering the crystal in his sword. That made him stronger, but it clouded his mind. He would not be a hero. A hero strives. Renato won with everything. The Emperor would die, and the wheel would turn, and all would be restored without rancor, without sorrow, without pain.
Small step for a fox, he thought. ravens say when they die? Never mind. I'll wait.
But the more he thought about it, and he had so much more time to think about it now that he was not worrying about the battle, killing the Emperor would not change anything. Another would take his place. Perhaps Zenobia. Perhaps the Speaker of the Rebel Council, and power would corrupt them too, and death would make grief, and grief would lead to hatred. He must lead by example. Reject the violence. Reject the desire to create violence. But how? Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? Finally, he came to the Emperor's ship. The path behind him was strewn with dead ravens. The path to enlightenment. His mistake, he realized, was trying to change the world. The world would spin and the wheel would revolve whether he strove against it or not. What he had to do was nothing. He had attained enlightenment. He sat down, adopted a full lotus position, and began to meditate. And all around him, the warriors stopped fighting too. They knew. They could feel his enlightenment. They gave up fighting, dropped their weapons, and became his disciples. No, just kidding. The nearest raven stabbed him with a sword and then chopped off his head. I might not have thought this through properly. Thought Renado's head as it rolled around the deck and died.